Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald in Springfield on the east side of Lanphier High School. You can see behind me the towers of Pillsbury and the greenery, which used to be the gem of the Springfield Park system, Reservoir Park, until the 1930s when Lanphier High School was built. Now, you may have known that bit of wisdom already, but I'll bet you there's some things about the North End coming up in this program that you didn't know. North End Pride, the story of Lanphier High School, its people and community. In fact, we're standing in Lanphier High School right now as we talk to the author of this book, Ken Mitchell. You know, this is interesting. You were sort of fascinated, and actually you grew up on the North End, so it was natural for you to be curious about it. But you got invested in this, and you kept digging and digging and digging and finding stuff out. Turns out there's a whole lot of people that really care about the North End, aren't there? A lot of people
really
bought your book. Scores and scores of people are buying your book.
I know, and they'll buy 2 or 3 copies for gifts. They'll come back and buy several more. It's a great gift, and there's something about the North End spirit.
There is, and you know what I find interesting about it is the people several people told me, you ought to do this story, and they were passionate about it. It was like they had some real passion that people don't know things about the North End, which were very important to the Springfield community.
And what I tried to do, I tried to use the North End as a backdrop for the story of Lanphier, and all kinds of people come up to me and they say, well, you need to talk about Reich Brewery, you need to talk about the Springfield Hospital, you need to talk about, you know, it's kind of like there could be 10 books out of this.
Yeah, and you might start another one, right? You never know.
Possible.
I mean, you've done that before. You've written numerous books, so you might just write another one. But it's fascinating. What I asked you to do is I asked you to get some of the photographs that you had in the book, to round up some of the people that you interviewed, and you have done that for us today. But let's start, before we get into that, let's start with Springfield as it looked when around the turn of the 20th century.
Yes.
Okay, show us through it.
Well, this square right here, it's a perfect square, and they laid out the city to be 1 mile wide and 1 mile deep. And this was North Grand Avenue. They were all avenues: North Grand, South Grand, East Grand, and West Grand.
4 Grand Avenues. Yeah, and they bordered Springfield.
Today, at 19th Street is East Grand, and MacArthur is West Grand.
West Grand, okay. Now, North Grand and South Grand are still named the same. And
there was different sections of town that started merging, and one was called North Springfield right here, kind of right northwest of where we are right now, and then Ridgely, there was a fellow named Charles Ridgely who started the Springfield Iron Company right over here, and that turned into a larger community, and of course then later it all encompassed Springfield. But that's how it all started. This was the state capitol. This was
let's point at that a little more so we can get on it. There's the state capitol, and this is the square, right,
yeah,
where the courthouse is, the old courthouse. Okay. Now, what delineates the north side?
Well, when I decided to write the book on the north side, you had to delineate it somehow.
Yeah.
And I used Carpenter Street as my line across there. So everything north of Carpenter and all the way to 31st Street and all the way west past well, I guess Chatham Road and beyond. But it's everything basically north of Carpenter Street.
And North Enders know who they are. I mean,
yes, they
do. They know where the North End is,
That's right?
They know where they grew up.
And it could be a little bit south of there, and they still call themselves North Enders and have the North End spirit. A lot of them actually have T-shirts with "I'm a North Ender." And no other part of town has that.
That's true. That's true. Pick that up for us and show us this. Now, I mentioned the park and the reservoir. Where we are standing now is the high school, but at one time it was like Eden, wasn't it?
Yes, it was called the Jewel of the North End. It was Reservoir Park, and it started in 1867. They needed a water supply source, and they got it from the Sangamon River, and they had to have a source for a reservoir in case of emergencies. And they brought a 15-inch main all the way down from the river. and they put it into this large reservoir that contained 4 million gallons of water.
Wow.
That itself is about as large dimensionally as a football
And
field.
you can't tell from this, but that's on a very high hill. That's built up so that there's a lot of depth to the reservoir. And there's a lagoon. As you can see, there's a lagoon over here. And the ballpark that we now know as Robert and Roberts Field, our stadium, is still there.
Yes.
It was originally a ballpark,
That's
wasn't
right.
it?
That's right.
Fascinating. Okay, now we have, like I mentioned, we have some gentlemen here who remember playing on that field and who, you know, as kids, toboggan down Reservoir Hill and all that kind of stuff. So we'll learn more about this, but before we leave this is a nice layout because it shows some of the major businesses that were in existence at the same time. These were huge employers on the north end.
They really were.
The Illinois Watch Company right here. And then right behind it, the Bunns also, I think the same Bunn family also created Sangamo, which was building the electrical equipment.
And right around this park, where Lanphier is today, were several big businesses. Pillsbury built right over here.
Right. It wasn't in existence yet now, but we'd see part of it, wouldn't we, here?
This is 1929, and we know that because this was just built the summer before. This was the memorial pool. And then right north here was the rolling mills I mentioned, and then you had the International Shoe Company down the street there. So several of the employers, you know, it was probably the north end probably was the industrial base of the town with 5,000 or 6,000, maybe more employees. Not to mention the various coal mines around, which employed another 5,000.
Yeah. Howard, we were just talking about Reservoir Park.
Yeah.
And you made this model, didn't you?
Yes.
Why?
Well, this was our second home. We lived across the street on North Grand Avenue. This was our second home. We loved it. And I wanted to make something that it would be remembered.
What was it like growing up next to Reservoir Park?
Pretty rough. Financial-wise, but growing up in the park with a bunch of guys that I grew up with, there was only 2 out of the whole bunch that didn't go to service, and one had a bad stomach, and the other one only had a part of an arm. And there was never any of them ended in the penitentiary. So I figured it was a nice bunch of guys.
It was a pretty good neighborhood, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah. Of course, you had a lot to do. You played some baseball, didn't you?
Yes.
Did you play baseball on that field?
The last year that I played with the Elks. And we played several ball games in there. And then we had a home-and-home engagement with Galesburg. And the night that we played there, we had the place packed. And we all ended up getting $100 apiece.
Wow.
And we also got a new pair of shoes and a jacket the next spring.
Wow. Well, here's a good picture of you and that team. This was the Eidenbacher team, right?
Right.
Eidenbacher?
Yeah.
Okay. That was a heck of a good team, wasn't it? It says it was a heck of a good team.
Well, we only played 50 ball games and we only lost 1.
It says the pay wasn't too good. Beer and sandwiches for pay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was our pay. Eats and beer.
When you were a kid, did you used to ice skate over here?
We used that lagoon for ice skating in the wintertime, slide down the incline there on a piece of tin or a piece of cardboard. It was a depression. We didn't have anything, so we didn't have any sleds.
Yeah.
But we did a lot of ice skating and fishing in the lagoon.
And I bet every evening you were probably over there. In the summertime, every evening?
Yeah.
Yep. So this was your babysitter, right? This place took care of you.
It what?
It was your babysitter. It took care of you, didn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I'm in a retirement home.
Yeah.
And it's something to do.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And all this is a bunch of junk, cardboard and.
There's also like a concession stand.
That was the concession. And if you were lucky enough to have a nickel, you could spend it there.
What could you get for a nickel?
Well, you'd get ice cream, popcorn, peanuts, candy. I don't know whether they handled tobacco or not, but I don't think they did in that concession.
Yeah.
So.
Good memories, huh? Good memories? Good memories?
I try to store it up here if I can find it.
Thanks, Howard.
Sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ken, we talked about Reservoir Park and this baseball stadium that has always been there. This was the first day when they opened it in 1927. That was a lot of pomp and circumstance, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. And it was even bigger 2 years before when they had the grand opening in May. And a lot of the area businesses closed for that afternoon, and it was packed. They even had people standing on the third and first base lines. It was such an event in Springfield.
Wow. And Reservoir Park, look at this. Now, this is a postcard, right? But you can see how beautiful it is.
It was, and that's taken from the north looking south. And you can see where this is the reservoir itself with the fountain. And that fountain had lights on it at night. It would spew the water. It was very beautiful. It was the centerpiece of the park. And this is the pavilion where they would go in and buy things. And
The kids could, no swimming, of course, but they could fish in here, and I guess they could skate on here when it froze in the wintertime.
And it's hard to tell, but this was actually an island right here. It's a little bitty island, and it's one of the islands on the North Lagoon.
It's such, I mean, it's great to have a high school here now, but it's such a shame not to have a park like that on the north end, isn't it?
When we passed Lanphier High School as a child, my dad, every time we drove past, he would cuss out the city fathers for tearing down this wonderful park when they could have built it 2 blocks north.
Yeah. Okay, and this is another look at some of the activities there, and it's that we all remember that time around the teens and the 20s as being such a gracious time. I'm sure there were a lot of hardships, but they really people dressed up and going to the park, make a day of it.
I had an elderly lady tell me that they used to have a carriage that would take people around the park, and around the edge of the park there were hundreds of sycamore trees, and it was just gorgeous. And then they would plant flowers in the spring. Yeah. It was just a lovely time to go to the park.
See, that's a perfect example of life on the lagoon here. And this is, look the way the kids were dressed.
I know.
This is probably a Sunday. They've probably gone to church in the morning, and they probably have gone to the park in the afternoon. Look how they're all
And
dressed
this is taking a shot north from North Grand, and this area right here was called the Duck Pond. And when Howard and Johnny Kohler and those people grew up, this was dried up, and they used to have, the kids would sit in there and they would watch the silent movies on Friday night.
Is that right? And here's a look at wintertime.
This is another view of the lagoon.
Look how crowded it is. They're falling all over each other. Oh, wow. And you mentioned this wonderful fountain that they had. Look at the size of that. Don't you wonder where that is?
Oh, I know. It's a shame that somebody didn't keep it. Now you can see around the edge of the top of the reservoir that they had fence there. When my dad grew up in the early 20s, the fence was a rickety, just made out of pieces of wood. And every once in a while they would drain this, and sometimes they would find a skeleton in the bottom. Yeah,
well, it's 33 feet deep. You can imagine that there would be some drownings there. Okay, so we come to a time when a high school is built here, and we all know the name Lanphier, but probably don't know who Mr. Lanphier was.
Mr. Lanphier was from Springfield. He graduated in 1894 from Springfield High. His dad was an attorney, and he went to, this fellow went to Yale and became an electrical engineer with high honors. Had a job with GE waiting for him back out east. Spent the summer of 1897 here in town, and just as a coincidence, he happened to was invited to Jacob Bunn Jr.'s house for a sit-down meal that evening. And Mr. Bunn mentioned that there was a German inventor who came to him with a patented what he called electric meter, It was a device to measure the electric output. And he was interested in it as a businessman and asked Mr. Lanfear, he said, would you look into it since you've got an electrical engineering degree? And he said, oh, I sure will. He got interested that summer in it. He met with Mr. Gutman, was the inventor, and they decided to form a company. And in 1899, they formed Sangamo Electric Company as a subsidiary of the Illinois Watch Factory.
So Mr. Bunn hires Mr. Lanfear, and he becomes an executive with the company.
Yes.
As a result of this patent.
Yes.
And they went on to become phenomenally successful, didn't they?
Yes. A lot of people don't know it, but Mr. Lanfear was one of the world-renowned electrical engineers. He was a friend of Thomas Edison, of a man named Charles Kettering, like Sloan Kettering Foundation.
So why was the school named after him?
He was the one who spearheaded the fund drive to have a third high school.
Oh, okay.
And he did not want, he was a very humble man, and he wasn't interested in having it named after him. He said, why don't we name it Sangamon High School? And, but they decided, he was such a nice fellow, philanthropist, a community leader, that they decided to name it after him. He also gave to the school a public address system. And when I first read about that, I thought, what's the big deal about that? But it was the first one in Springfield. It was a new thing where you could actually have every high school room be plugged in to the announcements or to the radio, which was a relatively new thing at the time. And he gave that to him, which in today's dollars would probably cost $60,000, $70,000, $80,000.
Now, while the school was being built, the students that were going to attend Lanfear had to go somewhere. And this was a district school, which I guess was underused, and so they went here, huh?
Right. This was real close to the Reservoir Park. It was on 8th and Converse,
Converse
or
grade
technically
school.
what's Eastman. And it was called, my mother and father went to school there. It was a grade school, and the first year, they called it, the freshman class named it Converse Corsairs. And they went to school there for several years until in 1937, in January, Lanfear opened.
Okay, and here we see this is the process that they're building. And you know, it doesn't look like 37. It really looks more modern. This would have been a very modern building.
And it was well done. They had a couple architects work together during the Depression to build it. And it was well done. The reason I use this picture, a fellow named Bullard was one of the architects, and his granddaughter is a friend of my wife's and mine, and she dug up these old pictures that he had taken. But some of these trees are from the old reservoir itself, and the reservoir itself was probably right in here. So this is from the back end of the school, and it does look extremely modern.
Some of those trees are still there.
Yeah.
And this, of course, is after the first phase is completed. And you can see this was all Reservoir Park, but now it's the home to Lanfear High School. Of course, it's much bigger now. They've added on.
Well, in 1958, they formed a junior high school system in Springfield. And they were going to build 2 or 3 junior highs, and this was one of them, Thomas Edison. Matter of fact, I was in the first class in 1958. And then a few years later, they decided to add on to Lanfear. They built a gymnasium, and then they connected the two in '69, and then they added the Commons over here in the late '90s. So the campus is a lot bigger than it once was, but that's what it was like in '58.
John Kohler, till not too many years ago, this was your store. You worked there every day, didn't you?
Yep, long time.
What'd you sell?
Sell everything. We the regular grocery store and a meat shop and everything, and then of course we shut her down and went into the catering business.
Yeah, yeah.
And but it was started in 1934. It was built in '34, and we actually never closed the business down until about 2005.
Your dad started the business?
My dad and my brother-in-law.
Yeah, they started it, huh?
They started
in the 30s.
They were the only people in town didn't know what they were doing.
They didn't have any idea how to run a grocery store, but they started one
They
anyway,
didn't
huh?
know. But my older brother, he took it over, and we made her good.
Yeah, and then you stayed in the business for, like you say, until you were in your 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but my youngest son, he ran for a while, but he couldn't handle it either.
There were lots of grocery stores on the north end, weren't there?
They claim that before the war there were 300 stores in Springfield.
Wow.
Now you think that's a lot, but you start counting them, and every corner you had a store, just like us. There was YT was north of us, 2 stores right in one block, and you went up that way, and there was 2 or 3 up in there.
Well, people walked to the store. You know,
Sure.
not everybody had a car.
They watched, and they could get credit.
And they could get credit. You probably, most of your customers, you just kept a tab for them, didn't you?
Oh yeah.
And then on payday, they would pay you?
Well, some of them didn't. They wouldn't spend the
Some of them
money
didn't.
at another store.
Too many of them didn't, right?
But we finally got our money. We never lost no money.
Yeah.
But it was a good business. It was a good business. We treated people right.
Yeah.
And that's one thing in the store. You know, a lot of guys go in business and they think they're going to make $1 million the first year. They don't pay their bills.
Yeah.
That
yeah,
catches
you can't
up
do
with
that.
them.
You can't do that.
But yeah, I had, you know, my younger brother. He handled all the delivery, and he was a good cook. Then the older brother, he took care of the books. We had it pretty well covered. And but when the war came along, it kind of screwed things up.
You probably knew every family within several square blocks, didn't you?
Oh, everyone. I had a lot of girlfriends, and I had a few of them that were just a little raunchy. I mean, you couldn't please them. Just couldn't please them. They probably never watched this, so I can say what it. They lived right down by Ken there, and yeah, it was. The family was. My dad, he was a coal miner, and in the summertime, while he worked in construction, he helped pour Pillsbury Mill.
Sure.
And of course the swimming pool, they poured that, and but they had to do something, because when they brought the mules out of the mine, it was time to get another job. But he always says they think more of those mules than they do the guys that work down there.
Yeah.
He says it was true. He says you got to teach that mule a lot better than you do the guys. But
so he went into the grocery business.
He went into the grocery business.
Yeah, that's a little easier anyway.
And,
long hours, but a little easier work, huh?
Neither one of them knew, and they were losing their tail. So at the time, my older brother, he was working for Swift and Company up in Michigan, and they wanted him to come back to work or go somewhere else, and he says no. He says he had a vacation coming. So my dad told him, he says, you come down and run the store, and he says you'll have something to do. Yeah. And he did, and he worked. He knew what about the grocery business, but we were very fortunate. Very fortunate.
Ken, John was talking about his dad before he went into the grocery business. You know, he worked at the coal mine, and then in the summers he'd work other places. But on the north end was a big coal mine that hired a lot of people, didn't it?
It sure did. And this one we're looking at right here, Panther Creek Mine 2, was just north of Walnut Street and North Grand. It was actually opened for 3 or 4 years when I was a little boy.
Hired a lot of people, and of course a lot of the north end, as the rest of Springfield, a lot of the north end was undermined because mines like this were digging all over the place, weren't they?
Most of my relatives worked in the mines, all the Italians.
Yeah, that's right. And he also mentioned his dad went and poured the concrete over at Pillsbury. And you can see what a operation, huh?
Yeah, a large family-owned company came out of Minnesota and came down here, built this main building. A few years later, they added on to it, and then they put these elevators here, and then these parts over here, and they were processing the wheat here, and they were making, kitchen desserts and all kinds of things, breads and biscuits and all that.
They must have hired hundreds of people to operate that.
It had over 1,500 in the heyday at the end of the 40s.
Wow.
It was a wonderful place. You would see these guys from Pillsbury walk home with their white hats on. They were like paper hats, and it was a wonderful place to work, Pillsbury Mill.
I bet they smelled good coming out of there too.
And the aroma from the whole, the neighborhood was wonderful, that aroma. We loved it.
We mentioned the Illinois Watch Company a little bit earlier, and these are, I don't know if these are the Bunns or not, but they were, go ahead and point them out if you would.
This is Jacob Bunn, and this is his younger brother, John. And Jacob founded the company, and his brother helped him with it, and it was a wonderful enterprise for many, many years. The Illinois Watch is a famous railroader's watch. They had the first open-face watch in the United States also. So it was quite an operation.
They were selling those all over the world. The Illinois Watch was a coveted watch. I mean, especially with the growth of the railroads.
Right.
It was a very coveted watch, wasn't it?
Right.
Would you reach over there and get the big poster? Because I want to show the observatory, which is a very interesting story. On the Illinois Watch Company grounds, they actually had built an observatory, and I thought, well, why in the world, Ken, would they build an observatory? It's an interesting story, isn't it?
What happened was they wanted to be able to check the time. They didn't have atomic clocks or anything in that day, of course, and they used the stars, and so it was an indispensable part of the business to have a very good observatory with a precise telescope and other instrumentation.
I'll be darned. And interesting, you tried to track it down. I mean, this building is gone now. A McDonald's is there now, but this building is gone. But you tracked down the telescope, didn't you?
Right. There were two different telescopes. The original one landed in Peoria, Illinois, and it's being used today by the Peoria Astronomical Society. And the second one landed at what they call Bunn Camp, a scout camp southwest of town. So it's too bad that they don't have the actual observatory rebuilt someplace. It was a large, ornate, two-story structure. It was beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you and our other guests, John and Howard. Thank you so much, Ken, for taking this time.
Appreciate it.
And also, I want to thank the folks here at Landfair High School for letting us come in. As you can hear, it's lunchtime right now, so it's a little noisy, but thanks also to the Landfair folks for letting us come in and tape this program. You'll learn a lot if you look at the North End Pride book by Ken Mitchell. In fact, if you want to go to the North End and pick up a copy of this book, it's for sale at one of those longtime merchants, Noonan's True Value. With another Illinois story at Landfair High School in Springfield, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send $19.95 to Network Knowledge, P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.